I'm involved with the Native American struggle and movement in San Diego, but more on an international level, because there isn't really a strong political or grassroots movement in San Diego for indigenous rights, but there's a lot of cultural movements, and so it's kind of how I stay connected. We got together down in Ocean Beach, Native American and non-Native people in San Diego, to support the movement in Canada for indigenous rights, and there was a national or international call to action today. Various leaders from the Native American community were going to be meeting today with the Prime Minister, and they were going to be discussing some of the issues that they have with some of the legislation that just recently got passed in Canada. In solidarity with those Native leaders, the chiefs, and other traditional and non-traditional chiefs that were going to be meeting with them, they called on people to come out today and support. We were out there, we were singing songs, intertribal songs from various nations throughout Canada, the United States, California songs, Lakota songs, and there's a song I sang from the Secwepemc Nation in British Columbia. I know a few Native brothers and sisters up in Canada because of my journeys, and so I wanted to support their call to action for Native sovereignty and indigenous rights. The indigenous people there, the Mayan people of Chiapas, rose up against the state and the Mexican government and the Mexican military in 1994. And so in San Diego, they've been having an annual celebration to celebrate the uprising for the past 9 years. And this links to what I was talking about earlier as far as the Idle No More movement, because I feel that indigenous rights in Chiapas are the same struggle that indigenous people in Canada are facing, and indigenous people in California or the United States as well. And so they're kind of all linked together. I'm really glad to see that it just so happens that indigenous people in Canada are beginning to, as they say, idle no more, and that they're beginning to organize themselves and to resist against the state, Canadian government's efforts to take their land, to privatize their land and water rights. There's a lot of importance, I think, in having solidarity. In particular, with the EZLN is a special case, I think, because of the solidarity that the EZLN received in places like the United States and in Europe, and many other places across the world, Canada even. The EZLN was able to, I believe, avoid a direct military attack from the Mexican government, because the whole world was watching, basically, back in 1994. And so it made it more difficult for the Mexican military to just go in and slaughter indigenous people in the state of Chiapas. And so solidarity was saved lives, I believe, in this struggle. Although the military in Mexico changed its tactics, or perhaps this was a tactic that they had planned all along, but they engaged in low-intensity warfare, and so to avoid bad, press and publicity and media, they would repress the people, the indigenous people of Chiapas, and constantly, pressure them into wanting to give up their struggle, and so that low-intensity type of warfare, I believe, was impacted by the amount of attention that the world was giving to their struggle in Chiapas. And so the military had to come up with other tactics, although they also had paramilitary groups that were going in and killing people. And there's a really famous incident that occurred. It was a massacre in Acteal where paramilitaries came into this small village and massacred, a group of people. I think it was like over 40 people that were massacred. And so, that type of warfare is more difficult to pay attention to, because it's not a straight out military advance, a straight out military attack where, the media and people will take notice and cameras will show up on the scene. This is more clandestine, more undercover, type of attack. And so many innocent people were killed. And actually I was there in Chiapas in 2008, and I got to witness the burial tomb that they built for the victims, the people that were massacred in Acteal. And so, I was witness to where this place is, where this took place, this massacre took place. And as part of another organization that I'm with, we were presented with a cross to carry as a symbol of one of the lives of the people whose lives were taken in Acteal, and we carried that cross. It was a cross across Canada and the United States and back to Mexico to share the story of the people that were killed there that day, the innocent people. So solidarity is very important. I think that's why it's important that Indigenous people learn about the struggles of other Indigenous people, not just in their state, their county, or their country, but across borders in other countries. And so I think the little work that we're doing here in San Diego is part of that. In 1994, when the EZLN came out into San Cristobal de las Casas, which is the main city in Chiapas, they grabbed the attention of the media, international media, because for the first time in many, many years, since the movements in Mexico in 1968, when students were massacred in Mexico City, there wasn't this massive uprising, I think, and especially an armed resistance against the Mexican government. And so in 1994, there was more people involved in organizing and in activism, at least in San Diego, but also across the Southwest from what I noticed in the 90s. And I was heavily involved in the student movement at San Diego State in 1994, and I was specifically involved in the Chicano student movement. And so for the Chicano student movement, we looked to the Zapatistas as a sign of inspiration. It really motivated us to believe in what we were fighting for, on college campuses and in the communities as well. And it reinvigorated us, it motivated us, and I think to see that it was people that looked like us and people that we could identify with, even though we couldn't see their faces, we knew that they were los de abajo, the people from down below, the people that are the most oppressed in their communities and in their societies. And so we saw that if these indigenous people in Chiapas can rise up, what's stopping us from organizing? And I think back then, people really wanted to be a part of the struggle, so much so that they went to Chiapas and they wanted to join the struggle because of ideals that they had, maybe that the way to real change was through armed revolution. And so they didn't see that happening here. It wasn't going to happen at a college campus. And so they went, and back then the Zapatistas would tell people, and I think they still tell people today, that the struggle for freedom is in your backyard. It's in your own home. It's where you're at, and that you need to go back to where you're from and engage in that struggle. Let us do the work that we need to do here in our homes, and you go do the work that you need to do in your homes. And that struggle for freedom or justice looks different in San Diego than it does in Chiapas, and an armed revolution may not be the avenue that you need to take at this moment. So you need to look at what are the best tactics and best approach in your community at the moment, at that time. And it's changed, from the 90s till 2013. A lot has changed. I think we're seeing a resurgence, and I think we're seeing a resurgence with the Zapatistas at this moment as well. I heard they just issued a communication just recently, last month. And so for me, back in the 90s, it was just, it's just a reaffirmation of the work that we were doing locally on college campuses, in the Chicano community, in the Chicano movement, in the indigenous community, and it reaffirmed what we believed in. And so they just basically provided a beacon of hope. The other thing that I'm working on is I'm part of another group, and for Anero Zapatista, we're showing a film, a Cuban film that it's in Spanish with the English subtitles, and it's a film about a person who had a sex reassignment surgery in Cuba, and so this documentary film, kind of covers the story of this person and what it was like for her in Cuba, facing homophobia and things like that, and what it's like to face gender discrimination or homophobia in a socialist country, and what that country is doing to fight homophobia. And so it's a really interesting film. She had the operation back in 1998, and it was paid for by the Cuban healthcare system. It was free, which is something that it would be unheard of here in this country, where the healthcare is privatized. And so it's a really good story to see what healthcare can be like under a socialist government, and also what homophobia is like, and what it takes to end homophobia or gender discrimination.